Room 209. Emily was desperate for a fresh start. After a rough breakup and losing her job, she needed a change, somewhere new where she could rebuild her life. That's when she found Ivy Towers, an old apartment building with vintage charm and an affordable price tag. When she met the landlord, Mr. Green, he seemed distant but polite. Room 209 was small, but it was enough for her. She signed the lease and moved in that same week. For the first few days, everything was calm. The building was quiet, almost too quiet. Emily enjoyed the peace, thinking that this new chapter of her life was exactly what she needed. But on her fourth night in room 209, she heard it, a soft tapping sound, coming from the wall behind her bed. She assumed it was the neighbor in the adjacent apartment. Maybe they were hanging a picture or doing some late-night repairs. But the tapping continued, night after night, always starting around 2 a.m. Curious, Emily decided to talk to her neighbor, Mrs. Klein, an older woman who had lived in the building for years. When Emily mentioned the tapping, Mrs. Klein seemed confused. "I don't have anything on that wall that would make noise," she said. "It's strange, I've never heard anything like that before." Emily brushed it off, but the tapping only got worse. Some nights, it was soft and rhythmic, but other times, it was frantic, like something, or someone, was trapped behind the wall, trying to get out. One night, unable to sleep, Emily called Mr. Green and asked him to check it out. The next morning, he arrived with his toolbox, tapping on the walls and listening carefully. When Emily mentioned hearing noises every night, his face grew serious. "This building has a long history," he said, almost in a whisper. Room 209, well, there was an incident here years ago, back when Ivy Towers was still a hotel. A guest disappeared, and no one ever found her. Some say strange things happen in this room, but it usually stops after a while. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't press for details. Mr. Green left, telling her to call if anything else happened. That night, the tapping started earlier than usual, but this time, it wasn't just tapping. Emily heard faint whispers, barely audible but undeniably there. "Help me," the voice whispered. Emily froze, her heart racing. She listened closely, and the whisper came again, clearer this time, "Please, help me." Terrified, she grabbed her phone and called Mr. Green. His voice on the other end of the line was urgent, almost frantic. "Emily, listen to me. Get out of that apartment. Now." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "Room 209 isn't safe. Leave now, and don't look back," he warned before abruptly hanging up. Panicking, Emily began packing her bags. As she shoved her belongings into a suitcase, the whispering grew louder, and the tapping returned, this time more frantic. Then, suddenly, the wall behind her bed cracked, splitting open with a loud snap. Emily watched in horror as a pale, skeletal hand emerged from the crack, followed by a twisted, hollow-eyed face. The figure pulled itself out of the wall, its body contorted and broken. Its whispering turned into a low, menacing growl. "Help me," it said again, but this time, the voice was dark, filled with malice. Emily didn't wait to see what happened next. She grabbed her suitcase and ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, and out of Ivy Towers, not stopping until she was far away. The next day, Emily found herself in the library, searching through old newspapers. In a faded article from 1952, she found the story of a woman who disappeared in Ivy Towers, last seen in room 209. She was never found, and rumors of strange occurrences in that room had haunted the building ever since. Emily never returned to Ivy Towers, but the memory of room 209 stayed with her. Even after she moved far away, sometimes, in the dead of night, she would hear it, the soft tapping, followed by a faint whisper. "Help me."